Thank you for listening to the Boost Over Ball podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Boost Over Ball podcast. We are absolutely thrilled today to bring you our interview with Coach LBP, currently of James Cheese, former performance coach and coach of Team Renegades in OCE. So without further ado, let's jump right into the interview.
Beautiful. Nice to meet you, boys. I remember meeting you, Kyle, at Worlds, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, a little bit of fate there. Love that.
Oh yeah, the jersey's hanging up in the office.
I'm so glad I got to get that out to you because they were just going to I think the guys were just going to throw them away. So got put to good use. Yeah. So got put to good use, which is good.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad it worked out. It's
like that.
It's like the one time I've ever been on Twitter at the perfect time.
Yeah, literally. Because I think he's like give it 10 minutes, and if there's nothing happening, it's like, oh well, okay. So I just hoping someone would message.
Hanging out with all you guys at Worlds, I felt like quite the old fart. I finally learned the power of Twitter because there was this where you end up with that jersey, and then we ended up chugging beers with somebody else because of Twitter.
Oh, Jake Lupton.
Yeah, that was fun.
Oh, right. Yeah, Worlds is definitely a sick time. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess we can get started, and I kind of wanted to start out doing an intro. So if you wanted to explain to people who don't already know kind of who you are, how you got involved in esports, and how you got involved in coaching specifically.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. So my name is Lachlan Parker, also known as Coach LBP within the Rocket League realm, kind of within the esports realm as well. And I guess my story goes back probably 2 or 3 years ago when I just graduated with a Bachelor of Sport and Exercise Science. At the time, I was working within traditional sports, so high-level professional rugby, football, martial arts, all sorts of different traditional sports, working with athletes, more so on a performance basis. So, strength and conditioning can, sort of generalized fitness for game day and what that looks like in the off-season sort of stuff. But I had a passion for the mental side and the cognitive side, and I was wondering, what can I do to sort of expand my awareness in this area? What can I sort of, grow and develop into in that sort of sense? And I'd always had a passion for esports, sort of, pretty much growing up playing COD, quite semi-professionally, and then sort of, had that passion to sort of think, I wanted to sort of connect the two. Because I saw them both as a key foundation of sort of growing up, and wanted to sort of understand, well, where can this take me if I can sort of, take this a bit more seriously. So then I went and did an undergrad in athlete mental health, sort of rehabilitation counselling, and that sort of gave me a little bit more insight into different realms of, sports psychology, different counselling in terms of depression, anxiety, all that sort of stuff, which sort of allowed me to understand more of the realm. But all of a sudden, I was able to sort of work with individuals on more so of that mental aspect, but then also more so on the performance aspect. So I was, essentially able to combine the two. And at the time, I had a mentor called Daniel Bonner in the OCE OC Rocket League scene, and he sort of reached out to me, and we're having a bit of a chat. And he said to me that there's a team who are looking for someone, to help with their mental on game day, and sort of have a bit of a chat with them, and sort of, just see if things click, right? Which was CJ. So he had reached out to Daniel on behalf of the Renegades and was looking for someone for game day. And I remember jumping in on a Friday, and we started having a bit of a chat. Sort of gave them an introduction about what I do. What I can, potentially bring to the table for the boys, because obviously my knowledge of Rocket League hadn't been too expansive. Didn't really know the game too well. Definitely didn't understand it at a high professional level, and so sort of gave him a bit of a generalized understanding of what I can do for them. And then sort of was like, "Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it." And then I said, "Okay, well, cool. When do you want to get started?" And he's like, "Well, we got a regional tomorrow, so let's just jump right in." I was like, "Let's send it," and we I jumped in. I think we won that regional, or maybe we didn't win that. We won second. We came second, but then we won the following regional, and then things just started to click. Sort of worked with those boys, and then sort of had quite a long off season with them, developing a lot more on the individual basis sort of stuff, and then got the opportunity to step up into Renegades as head of performance. So I was not only working with Rocket League, I was working with the Renegades, Apex, Valorant, CSGO, and Call of Duty team. Obviously, it wasn't as in depth with as the Rocket League boys, but I was still able to provide some insight and sort of have a bit of one-on-one and group sessions with the other teams as well. And yeah, sort of progressed into going to a few majors, making worlds, having a trip to Saudi Arabia. And now sort of, with obviously the Renegades sort of disbanding in a way, I've sort of moved to APAC and, sort of reigning champs in APAC now. So I guess that's a little bit of a recap sort of thing, the best way I could do it.
Yeah, and that's I had known that you came originally from conventional sports, kind of the way that we put it here, but
yeah.
What do you find as the biggest similarities and differences between competing in high level rugby, professional sports, and esports?
I definitely think, especially for game day, I've talked about it tons of times, whereby professional players in esports and professional players in normal sports, they all have somewhat of a pre-day routine, a pre-day game routine, where that's a specialized warm-up for themselves, whether that's enabling themselves to get into that cognitive state where they're able to sort of understand, right, today's game day, I've been doing the practice, whatever that looks like in terms of my schedule block, so now it's time to sort of make everything come together and click. The biggest difference is, obviously when you look at traditional sports, you have teams of rugby, you have teams of 12, 13, 14, 15 players more, right? You look at esports and you have Rocket League, a team of 3 players. So it's a lot more compact. And because of that, you need to be able to rely on your sort of, friends in that way, or teammates, how I like to see them as friends, a lot more closely. You need to have that a lot more tighter connection. And I think it's important to have that tighter connection because it sort of leads to, that development of trust. Because if you've got a team where one person is not really, buying into that trust factor, well, all of a sudden you've got 33% of the team that's not really there, right? And that's a big percent. So I think, sort of understanding what goes into a pre-day game routine is one of the most important things, but also sort of the generalized culture that a team has. You look at, traditional sports, and some clubs, some organizations have a distinct culture, how they want to represent themselves on game day, whether it's being loud, being, over the top, being hyped up. You can sort of see that in esports as well. It's replicated towards a team that sort of has a specific culture, where they're maybe a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more energetic, or maybe they're a little bit more reserved in the way they want to hold themselves. So there is a couple of different factors which I've always found pretty interesting, that you can sort of adapt different similarities, but of course there's differences as well, right? So it's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's definitely an awesome way of looking at it. I currently coach a collegiate team, a university team over here, and I have been a big proponent of the kind of the camaraderie of and teamwork aspect, because in the league that we compete in, there's a team that, certainly they're a good team, but are not, they're not top 100 players, but they can beat most anybody because they actually play together. There's less egos. There's, they actually want to work together as a team, and I think that could be really powerful.
Definitely.
But transitioning a little bit from kind of your background, me and you originally met at Worlds, and with everything that happened, being there, CJ retiring, making, the main event, what was that experience like for you, just being there and being a part of that?
It was a kind of crazy experience because we sort of qualified for Worlds in probably not the greatest way. Our qualification for Worlds was dictated by KCP's and Power's performance in London, because obviously we didn't qualify for London. So we're all sitting in a Discord call, sort of hoping, righto, let's hope Power goes 0 for 6 here. And it's sort of like, it's sort of a weird thing to sort of root against your region. But at the same time, we obviously sort of had to. And then obviously finding out we've made Worlds through that way. Yes, it's a bit of a weird way to make it, but I guess we made it, as first seed in the end. So I guess something came to fruition through that. And then it was sort of exciting, right? Because we had Saudi, we had Gamers 8, and then all of a sudden we had Worlds like a week after. So we viewed Saudi as almost like just an extended mega boot camp, where all of a sudden you'd have a ton of teams over in Saudi to play against, to practice against. Obviously, a couple of MENA teams, which we all know are freaks. So we had a good opportunity to sort of have a bit of an extended practice, which was awesome. Which obviously, sort of in hindsight, KCP going to Worlds didn't really have, right? So I felt like that was a pretty big advantage for us. And then sort of qualifying for Worlds, and then the trip to Worlds was sort of surreal as well, because realistically, I've said it a few times, it's my first year coaching esports, and it's like all of a sudden I'm leading a team as number 1 seed into the world champs. It was a bit surreal, but I also was able to recognize that it didn't come with just like getting through it and it's like, oh, we just won everything. There was a ton of struggles, there was a ton of ups and downs. There was a ton of moments where the team was almost going to disband, right? And it was sort of my job and my opportunity, not really opportunity, but my responsibility to make sure that that didn't happen, and to make sure there was that ability to keep the team intact, to make sure there was no heads butting. And I felt I felt like I did a pretty good job of that. But yeah, going into Worlds, kind of a crazy experience, seeing so many teams under one roof, and all of a sudden you've got, what realistically is the best teams in the world for this season. So it was a crazy experience. And then obviously, sort of the mindset was that, at the end of the day, we don't have any expectations. We're not going to put any, unwanted pressure on our backs to perform. Because when we do that, that's when we start to overthink. That's when we start to be a bit more hesitant. So we just wanted to make sure that we go out there and we have fun. And that's the most important thing that we saw. And then obviously, yeah, sort of, the results sort of come out, sort of having a pretty good series against Secret, and then a pretty amazing series against Optic as well to make a main event. And then sort of, yeah, as you said, it was a nice way to sort of cap it off with making main event and then having a nice little moment with CJ retiring afterwards. I felt like that was just like the cherry on top. It would have been nice to get the win against NRG, who obviously didn't look the greatest.
I was secretly rooting for that. I thought that you guys looked really good coming out of the group. I thought you had a real shot there.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And then yeah, sort of, because I think if we had beaten them, then we would have played Semper as well, and they obviously had the 2 men in quarantine and 1 on stage. Yeah, so that would have been that could have been such a Mickey run, but I think we were all really proud and sort of happy of what we did, and we sort of left with no regrets. So I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But yeah, definitely a phenomenal experience, and hopefully one I get to experience again this split.
That's awesome. Yeah, I especially in the fall split, you'd mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you transitioned to APAC with James Cheese. You guys looked phenomenal in the fall split, dominating, dropping like less than 10 games total, just playing some really fantastic Rocket League.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a crazy sort of thing, because obviously, I wasn't for the first two regionals. I wasn't with James Cheese. That was sort of my time of sort of like, I stepped down from Renegades. I was talking with a few different teams internationally. I was trialing with a few teams for a couple of extended periods of time, but things didn't really click, and there was a few different sort of managers and stuff who weren't quite ready to sign, a new coach. So it was a bit of a, it was almost quite a, like I got to a point where it's like, am I going to have to just sort of transition back into traditional sports now, or am I going to just leave esports as a whole? And it was kind of a weird feeling, thinking, just performed really, really good at Worlds. And now all of a sudden I'm thinking, well, there's nowhere for me to go. Because obviously with OCE sort of KCP power and Ground Zero pretty much filled to the brim, I didn't really foresee myself sticking in OCE with that tight sort of bundle. So obviously I looked to NA, had a chat with Sam, had a chat with Mena, but then all of a sudden, throughout this whole little venture of finding a team and finding a new sort of home, I've obviously been talking with Kami a lot since we developed a really good connection on Renegades. And he was like, we sort of had a bit of a chat about, what was going on in his team. And yeah, sort of the opportunity got presented to sort of come on board and work with those boys a little bit more on the mental sort of stuff, and sort of just, take from there. So I felt like that was, a little bit of a new opportunity, but also a good opportunity because I also knew Kami, so I knew how he functioned. And then obviously Realize and Vert are two awesome people as well. So it's a pretty good team that just clicks.
That's awesome.
Well, and one thing's kind of like a little left turn here, but I'm very curious. Before you became a coach, before you jumped into esports, did you have a lot of like, personal travel, anything like that? And as all of this travel, jumping all around the world and doing these events, how's that experience been for you?
Yeah, no, definitely. Before jumping in as being a coach, I traveled a little bit. So I've been to Japan by myself like 3 or 4 times. I lived in Japan for, I want to say, the better half of 3 or 4 months, a little bit rural in the south of Japan. So I lived there for quite a while. And apart from that, I'd been to like Indonesia, but not really anywhere in North America, nowhere in Europe. And sort of the idea of going to Europe was this almost like a foreign idea almost. So you can imagine my reaction when, first season, all of a sudden we're qualifying for Sweden. It's like, hey, hang on, what's going on? Which was a definitely surreal idea. And it's sort of, I can sort of acknowledge, sort of the position I'm in, being able to go to these amazing places because, when am I guess, in hindsight, ever going to say that I'm going to, unironically go to Saudi Arabia? Probably never. So I think I have to be pretty gracious for the opportunities and everything that has, sort of been presented to me, because I never would have had the opportunity to go to these places. Like even America, like the thought of going to America was not a foreign idea, but I sort of wanted to always go, but I never thought how I would go. Whether it would just be a holiday or what that would look like. And then all of a sudden I'm, sort of we're qualifying for the LA Major and having a 25-day trip with a 2-week boot camp in Michigan sort of thing. So it's definitely been a crazy ride, and I'm looking forward to hopefully, obviously with the most recent Rotterdam Major over in the Netherlands, hopefully to continue that in San Diego. So that'll be good.
You said you boot camped in Michigan?
Yeah, so the Renegades headquarters is based in Michigan.
Where?
Near Troy.
God damn it. That's like 10 minutes from my house.
Yeah, so they have like a game time facility, which sort of Renegades used as their own sort of little headquarters. So throughout that time, I don't think game time's been like functional for quite a while though. But yeah, we sort of had a 2-and-a-bit week boot camp there. And then throughout that time, obviously, we met Jonas Jerebko and went to his house and played basketball on the bottom floor of his house because he's got a full-fledged basketball court in his house. So that was an experience. But no, that was definitely a unique thing, because it almost felt like a 2-part trip, boot camping in Michigan, and then all of a sudden jumping on a plane again, and then flying from the snow and rain into sunny LA, which was good. So it was a good experience. So definitely one that I'm never going to forget.
That's awesome. And then I'll transition again. So you were at Rotterdam with James Cheese. How was that? Was that like a different experience for you than being there with OCE, being in a different region, being able to compete and kind of coming in a little bit differently as like the top of your region by your own hand, as opposed to kind of waiting on other people?
Yeah, it was a little bit different, but I'd sort of adapted into the team pretty well and sort of understood, sort of what the goal was. Part of it was sort of myself creating the goal for the team on what we would go into the major and do. And the biggest thing that I sort of wanted to take out of it and sort of put forward to the boys was, this major, there really only is one thing about it, and it's weakness exposure. Because realistically, there's not many other teams in APAC that can expose those weaknesses that we have. On the surface level, pretty much every other team at the major can expose, what weaknesses that we may have. So I think that was just a big hindsight of, looking at pretty much just getting experience, right, as a team, especially with Vert's first sort of major or land in a while. So you're just getting him back on the foot and sort of helping him to sort of embrace back into a team that was actually, quite a good communicating one, and sort of allowing Kami to sort of maybe step up into that role as a little bit more of a leader for the boys, because obviously Kami being such a veteran, he was able to sort of naturally fall into place and sort of help the boys. But it was a really good experience sort of as a team collectively, sort of just understanding what some of those weaknesses are. And it was really good as well, because the thing about it was we went into the major not having scrimmed for over a month, just because Vert had gone back home to Ireland. So there wasn't really an ability for the boys to scrim. So we sort of went into the major, had 2 days of practice, and then sort of, that was it, send it. And I felt like we did pretty good, holding our own against K-Corp, only scoring 4 goals in 3 games, 2 games, 1 goal games. I felt like that was pretty good, especially in game 1 where we had more shots than them. So we were creating opportunities. So there was definitely a ton of positive things I think personally we can take from the major, that will just allow us to maybe build back into what looks like maybe a better major next time. But hopefully, with different things, happening behind the scenes in terms of organisations and all that sort of discussion, hopefully it comes into fruition whereby, next time major rolls around, we're able to have maybe like a 1 or 2 week boot camp, and that'll just allow us to get a little bit more practice in, and sort of just allow us to sort of iron out some of those fundamental flaws that were exposed at the major. That's
awesome. I certainly, I've been a little bit fortunate where I've been able to see some of your guys' games throughout the regionals, and something seemed a little bit off at the major. Not the attacking style that I'm used to seeing from you guys, but James Cheese, certainly a fantastic name, one of the favorites of Ace and I. But yeah, I
still can't say it or hear it without laughing. I don't know why.
Yeah, I had a chat with my mum about it, and I was like, sort of got an opportunity to join Kami's team. Oh, I think you cut out a bit.
I definitely
He does
did.
that.
Yeah, I definitely did.
All good.
Back now.
Cool.
Yeah, so I was sort of just saying there, on the back of what you said, Ace. I told my mum about the team name, and she's like, "No, that's not the team name." And I was like, "Yeah, that's the team name, James Cheese." And she's like, "That's got to change." I'm like, "No, it's iconic." So it is a bit of a strange one, but yeah, hopefully we can. Obviously without any major stuff, but hopefully we can, maybe look to have a bit of a different name going into next split.
I was gonna ask about that because I know there's another pretty good iconic name that we've noticed from sub-Saharan Africa. It was May Contain Nuts,
Right.
and they just got picked up as well, and so they had a name change. But so generally, a lot of the fun names that we've gotten over the years, like Weedem Girls and stuff like that, kind of get changed once teams get picked up. But I kind of think it's only a matter of time for the boys because they just have been showing so well in APAC.
I want James Cheese to lean into it, and I want cheese everything. Just cheese hats. Just go for it.
That would be pretty. That'd be sending it, wouldn't it? That would definitely be sending it. But yeah, I think I don't know if you know the origin or if people listening know the origin. The origin was sort of the boys rocked up in Korea. I think it was like the first, second night. It was one of the nights when they sort of all got settled in, and they went out for dinner. And there was only one restaurant in the area with an English name, and that was James Cheese. They're like, okay, that's the team name then. So a lot of people thought it was about the clip of one of the Top Gear guys, James, saying like, "Here's a cheese" or something, but no, it originates from a restaurant. So yeah.
Oh man, I had not heard that. I'd only heard kind of the Top Gear one.
Yeah, that's what I think everyone thought. So. Bit different. I feel like the Top Gear one should have. It's a better sounding story. So, but oh well.
Maybe they watched that episode right before they went to the restaurant.
Yeah, maybe. Just to help solidify the name, you know.
Oh, for sure. But last thing before I jump into some kind of more coaching specific questions. You said if all goes well for you guys this split, which I can't really foresee happening. Knock on wood. You're planning on making the trip with the boys to San Diego?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. I think that, if everything goes well, I think there's been a couple of different intel stuff about, maybe a few different teams coming to APAC, maybe. I don't know yet. There's been a couple of different rumors floating around. Definitely, we've been looking at Reddit. I love looking at Reddit just because half of Reddit just sometimes don't know what they're talking about. So it's always good to see that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether there is any disruptors coming into the APAC scene. But even if there is, we'll only view that as an extra challenge and extra just practice for us. So we're not going to see anyone as a threat really. But even I guess we can still do that just because we don't want to sort of hold that ego too high. Because when you hold that ego too high, that's when you start to get complacent. You don't practice as much. You start to just potentially quite fall off pretty hard. So I still think it's important, if there is anyone coming to APAC, sort of have a mindset of, all right, well, they're coming to APAC obviously with an intention and of a belief that they can sort of perform well throughout the split. So you can't really drop the ball too hard for sure. But yeah, hopefully things go to plan. I think I was looking on Liquipedia yesterday. I think we've already qualified for the Spring Invitational, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, it'll definitely be an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, well, if all goes to plan for you guys and you end up there, we'll have to hit you up. Ace and I are both bought our tickets already to the major in San Diego, so we'll have to buy you a beer or something.
Oh, definitely. I look forward to that. That'll be good. 100%. We'll keep for the books, and then we'll have like a little bit of a podcast flashback photo or something. That'll be sick.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But moving more towards kind of some coaching specific questions, one that I kind of get, and I'm sure you do as well. But what is your favorite and least favorite part about coaching?
Favorite part and least favorite part, yeah, right. Least favorite part, I think my least favorite part is when the clock in game, counts down and goes go, because all of a sudden, for the better half of 5 minutes, I lose control. Of I sort of what I can do, and it's almost like, especially in like an OT, where I don't want to talk, I don't want to say anything. I'm just sort of in this static position that I have to mute my mic and listen. And gee whiz, some of the Game 7 OTs that I've sort of gone through, I've had to I couldn't even watch my screen a couple of times. I was just like pacing around my room because I think there was one Game 7 OT that was a qualifier for a major, and I was thinking, we've done everything. Let's just lock it in here. And you sort of lose the ability. I always have discussions with the boys after each game, sometimes after each goal, if it's like a quick 2 or 3 second little saying something just to help that reset, to help lock back in. What to look out for, make sure the kickoff's good, all that sort of stuff. But for the better half of it, there is that sort of feeling of just hold on. And I sort of reflect back. Go on.
I was gonna say almost like helplessness. I know exactly what you're feeling.
Yeah, exactly, like helplessness. Like I remember it was the last game in this series versus Optic at Worlds to make main event, and it was literally like 2 minutes to go, and I started having like tears were falling down my eyes because I couldn't control them, because it was like, just please hold on. I think we were like 1 goal up, and then they scored to equalize, and I think we scored another one. And I was just like, I couldn't control myself. It was crazy. It was like the culmination of everything throughout the season had led to this 1 minute 30 where I have zero control of what happens. If they score 2 goals, that's the end of the run. And it's like, it's not fair in a way, but that's just the way coaching goes, and that's just the way the game goes. But, then I remember it was ticking down. It was like 30 seconds. It was like 15 seconds. And then Kami banged it into their half, and I'm like, all right, that's a good clear. All right, no overcommits now. We don't do anything silly. And I just remember the comms starting to get a little bit more, anxious, a little bit more hesitant. And I was thinking, just lock in. We've been here before. We know what we can do, so let's just do it again. And that was definitely a good thing. But even still, the outcome of that I see as a positive. So it's a bit hard to call that a negative, but I think that is probably the only negative I have in coaching, is that inability to sort of have an impact mid-game and just sort of be forced to sort of watch. I guess you could also maybe say another negative is actually no, you probably couldn't. I think that's probably is the only one. I've always seen coaching in my eyes as a very positive thing with a lot of different positive outcomes. Because I feel like my way of coaching is a lot more enabling of, not just helping the boys inside the game, but, I want to be there to make sure that everything's good outside the game in regards to, their actual quality of life, in terms of, how they get along at home and, what their goals are. When they put the game down, they've got other things to think about, whether it's study, whether it's work, whether it's, going out for an exercise session, whether it's, the relationships they have, partners and all that sort of stuff. They're all considerations that I put in place to sort of help myself understand what makes these boys perform and what enables them to perform and be their best they want to be. What really strives to unlock that, you could say that underlying motivation to be the best they want to be. They're all considerations that I put in place, which I view as a very positive thing, being able to sort of have an input and have control. Because there's been quite a few moments where we've had these really, really downtrends. And all it's taken is a couple of timeouts from the game and just like, let's have a chat about life and let's have a chat about these things that are, sometimes out of our control. But obviously with the boys, the pressure to make a major, the pressure to, perform in a regional, sometimes that pressure does add up. So I think, being a coach, it's sort of my, obligation, but also my ability to sort of provide the boys with an outlet, right? And enable them to have a chat on the side and have a chat after the game, or if things aren't clicking between one of the boys with someone else, it's like, okay, so is there something that's, is there something that I don't see? So I think that the coaching pros tremendously outweigh the cons in my mind. Because then obviously you have the ability to sort of think, okay, well, I guess maybe some people view, a loss as a major negative. But I view a loss as sort of an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn. Hang on, sorry, I just have a sip of water.
All good.
No worries. Now, while you take your drink, I actually am very curious because you had mentioned timeouts just a few minutes ago here, and I'm curious because I'm pretty new to this. This is the first year I've really been paying attention to RLCS, but what I've seen is that those timeouts are incredibly impactful. You see teams
Mm.
that are just losing, and then they have a timeout and they turn it around.
Oh yeah.
From your What happens in that, was it a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, that can make such a big impact?
Yeah, I think they released the stats, and it was like a team wins like 80% of the time after taking a timeout, or something crazy.
Yeah, I think it happened one time in the Rotterdam major that the team that took a timeout didn't win after.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy, and I talked about this in depth with Chrome about it. The importance of timeouts. I think I had a chat with Eclipse about it as well. The efficacy of timeouts, and I think as a coach, a lot of people think that it's the coach's role to call a timeout, but a lot of the time the players themselves will be like, "Yep, I want a timeout." There's been a few times where I think we should take a timeout, and the boys are like, "No, I don't want to take a timeout. Let's just roll with the momentum." We sort of understand what's going on, even though I feel like we should take that extra 1 or 2 minutes to sort of have that mental debrief. But then on the flip side, there's been a few times where I've sort of said, "No, look, we are taking a timeout," just because things weren't clicking communication-wise. And the boys were like, "Nah, things will be good next game." And I was like, "Nah, let's just take a timeout. Let's just reset." And I think, we lost the first game, and we took the timeout, and then we won the next 4, so we won 4-1. So in my mind, timeouts are massive. And I think that there is different things that different coaches do during the timeout. Some coaches I've had a chat with literally just used it as a time whereby, here, boys, you've got a minute 30. I'm not going to have too much an impact. You can use this timeout for whatever you want to do. What I did with the boys was we sort of trained to sort of understand, all right, well, this is what we're going to do during a timeout. So when a timeout is called, this is what we're going to do. And so we're not really mucking around with time, or, we're really using those seconds to the best of our ability. And sort of the way I handled timeouts was, once we called one, it was, as soon as we call that timeout, I want to hear from someone straight away. Whatever they're thinking, I don't want there to be 5 seconds of silence, 10 seconds of silence, 15 seconds of silence. I don't want to be the one to say, "Righto, boys, what went wrong there? What went right there? What do we think? What do we reckon about our commit cell? What do we reckon about our boost manager? What do we reckon about those comms?" I just want to hear from one of the boys straight away. That's all I want. Because that shows me that, they're ready to be engaged. They're ready to think about what happened. They're ready to sort of help each other. And the way I view things is a very tight, almost coaching triangle, where you look at a triangle and it's enclosed and it bounces off each other. If you have one player who's all of a sudden like, "Yeah, that was good," let's say, for example, on Renegades, where CJ might have been like, "Yeah, that was awesome, Thieves. You're really managing your boost there. You're really sort of pushing up and taking the lead as first man." Whereas Kami, you're really sitting back and sort of providing ourselves with some really good comms. That within itself sort of casts a light on both Fever and Kami within themselves, and all of a sudden they're taking a lot of inspiration from what CJ's saying. So that's a big thing I've always strived to sort of make sure that happens, whereby we have that sort of a reflection of maybe what happened during the last game, or what might have not been the best, but also what our natural standards are for what we hold ourselves and what we know that we can do. Because at the end of the day, you can't let one game predict how well you are as a player, right? That's just unfair, and you can't do that. So it's like, locking back in, taking that bit of a reset and thinking, we just let one game sort of, slip away from us. We didn't play the way we wanted to play. We didn't, play the pressure, the suffocating high pressure gameplay that we know best. So why was that? Sort of have a chat about it. What went wrong, what went right, but then sort of provide a little bit of feedback to each other that enables each other to have that bit of extra confidence. Like, "Oh yeah, all right, I appreciate you saying that." And then all of a sudden you've got 3 players who are giving feedback and giving each other confidence boost. And it's sort of like, it's a train that you can't stop almost. So I think that's the way that we handle timeouts on Renegades. Obviously, we haven't really had a timeout. Or maybe you do have one in regional. I don't think we haven't really had a timeout yet on James Cheese. So it's definitely an interesting challenge I'm looking forward to think, what makes Realize and Vert tick during that time. Obviously, I know Kami pretty well, but Yeah, it's interesting because different coaches do different things. So there really isn't a correct way to take a timeout or a way that should be taken. But I think it's important to sort of find the way that works best for you and what that looks like in the grand scheme of things, especially because it's very individualized. And one player might be like, I just want to take this time out of a minute to sort of just close my eyes, take a few deep breaths, have a sip of water, find that mental, happy place where I can sort of be a little bit more relaxed. And that will naturally allow me to feel more confident going into the next game. Whereas the other two might be a little bit more chatty between each other, right? So I think it's important to sort of not be forceful and like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen. But you need buy-in at the same time from everyone to sort of acknowledge, okay, well, this is what we're going to do during a timeout, for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've always been curious because I like you said, I've been on the end of the not being able to do much during a match while coaching. I've played in a league where they allow coaching during the match, which is very unusual.
Wow.
So like open
That's
comms
crazy.
Pretty much the whole time, which I think is a little bit excessive personally.
Yeah, it's almost invasive.
Yeah. But the competitions that, the school and the boys care about more are the ones that, you can talk in between games. You can take a timeout if you need, but it's mostly just kind of let them do their own thing. But that's awesome hearing about the timeouts. It seems like every team kind of has their own process for them, but whatever process it is, it's kind of been, I'm sure it's been tried through like scrims and matches so that they can kind of best use their, minute and 30 seconds that they have to kind of recenter themselves.
For sure. Definitely.
But we kind of heard about your process during games and how you like to coach, but what is your like preparation process like? Like how do you prepare going into a match? I mean, it's going to be a little bit different in, kind of a major event because it's all in person where, regional events could be, online and it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think there is a difference between, sort of going into a regional versus going into a major. Obviously, a regional is a little bit more of a laid-back environment whereby the players are able to feel a little bit more comfortable because they're at their own PC, they're at their own station, they're in their own seat, they've got the environment that's catered towards them best. So it's a lot more easier to sort of prepare for that. But I personally, whether it's my own coaching style or my own coaching methodology, I haven't never really looked too much into other teams. That's something I always sort of held on my own on Renegades. I feel like there's a lot of teams, a lot of coaches that really look into, spend hours upon hours looking at teams, looking at specific rotations, how they can break them up, how they can, sort of, be a little bit more high pressure in their third and, what that looks like in terms of leading to scoring opportunities. But the thing on Renegades that we always sort of had a chat about was that at the end of the day, we just want to play the way we want to play. We're not gonna all of a sudden, we're coming up against Optic. Let's whip out, let's whip out this rotation because we know they do this rotation. We don't want to get too just nitty gritty with it. And I feel like that always just helped us feel like we're playing better because we played at core the way we wanted to play. And sure, there's things you sort of change around like a little bit, whether it's I want to change, maybe, on kickoff or, maybe they hard cheat on kickoff and you want to sort of counter that or, something different that's a little bit, you have those niches. But I think the core fundamental or like 85% of what we did was just, let's just play the way we want to play. We know this works. We know that we can create high pressure naturally because of our rotations. So there's no point in trying to sort of out rotate or out of, sort of just change something up drastically in order to maybe lead to one scoring opportunity, right? If we play the way we want to play, we know that naturally a goal will come. And if not, we'll have a crazy amount of shots. So I think it was sort of setting the fundamental of what that looks like though in the start. And I think there was times where, especially after LA Major, where things just were not there. And we sort of had to go back to the drawing board and think, okay, well, what does that look like? And why isn't this working? And what do we need to change in terms of our rotation, in terms of where third man is and where second man's pushing up, maybe pushing up a bit early or the types of challenges first man's taking, right? Sort of what that looks like in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I think you're right. There is a little bit of a difference in terms of a regional versus a major, in that a regional, yeah, well, is there? Yeah, I guess there is a difference. It's sort of that ability for the boys to, as I said earlier, be at home and sort of be in their own groove, but then also understand, look, we're going to go up against this, and this is just another day in the office sort of thing. It's almost like a scrim. That's the way we sort of looked at some of our game days. Like, all right, we just got an extra scrim today, and that helped the boys to sort of offload a little bit of pressure on themselves, because all of a sudden they were thinking, all right, well, we've got no expectations, we've got no pressure on our backs. This is just third scrim or fourth scrim of the day. Let's just go in, lock in. We've had a couple of good scrims already, so let's just replicate that. But when you go to a major, it's completely different, because the big difference is, well, you can sort of see someone across from you, right? It's like, okay, I'm not looking at a wall behind me. I'm actually looking at Chicago, or I'm actually looking at, whoever. I'm looking at someone, right? I'm sure there's someone there.
You're also hearing fans scream, right? Does that play?
Exactly.
Those headphones can't be that soundproof, right?
Yeah, the ones that we got in Worlds, they were, gee whiz, they were iron weights. They literally, you put them on your head and they clamped your head in. You thought your head was going to pop. They were crazy.
No way.
They were so tight. You could not get them off. So they were honestly really good. But I think they were like super expensive as well. But you're right. There is a difference when during the wildcard stage at Worlds, where you're looking out onto a crowd all of a sudden. And that's a big difference. And we had the opportunity to, obviously in Saudi, to have a little bit of a crowd experience. But before that, we hadn't had an opportunity to have a crowd in front of us. And it's a big, big, big difference compared to being at home and being in your own little cozy little station. All of a sudden, you've got a couple of hundred or 1,000 or whatever people looking at you. And obviously, that changes for main event. So there is that difference, and you need to account for that. And some teams can do it really well. Some teams need a couple of tries, need a couple of attempts to make sure they can sort of deal with that. And it's a tricky thing.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would be like, playing in front of as many people as you guys did it at Worlds, especially with the sold out arena, all the people watching on Twitch, being able to kind of stare right across it at the people you're playing. It would be a lot of fun, but so nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think another consideration that we have to put in place as well is, when we played main event and we played up on the stage in front of everyone around us, we were also playing NRG. So I think probably 95% of the stadium was rooting against us, which is an extra pressure on our back, because as soon as NRG scored, literally the whole stadium just erupted. And it was a completely different sound in comparison to when we scored. So I think that was an extra consideration that we had to sort of accept. Look, let's just go out there, backs against the wall, doesn't matter what happens. Let's just have a bit of fun with it. We know the crowd's not in our control. We know, we can't control those sort of reactions. But that's just, it's one of those external factors that you learn to adapt to over time. And I think it was just one of those things where it's like, all right, so what? You can have a couple of different mindsets about it, whether it's like, oh, they're going to be so scary, they're going to be so loud, how are we going to deal with it? I'm going to be playing so more nervous. But at the end of the day, you're sitting in a chair, you're looking at a screen, that's the exact same. All that's different is a little bit of color, a little bit of light outside of your peripheral vision. That's all that's different at the end of the day, and a bit of noise. So you can sort of train against it. You can sort of, have different visualizations about what it's going to feel like, what it's going to be like, and train yourself towards it. I did a little bit of that with Fever, sort of working with him about, if we close our eyes, what that looks like in the grand scheme of things, the noise, imagine hitting a flip reset and hearing the crowd just erupt, and sort of practicing different visualization, methods and sort of protocols and what that looked like. But at the end of the day, you can go through all this stuff, and I think it's a big thing that a lot of people have to consider and think about, is that you can go through a lot of this stuff in terms of mentality. You can go through all of it, but you can get up there as well, and all of a sudden the players forget it. And it's like, oh, heck, this is real. I'm actually doing this. This is my one shot to play in front of 12,000 people or whatever, and so some of the stuff goes out the window, and you have to be considerate of that. You have to have a backup plan for if that happens, which is again a tricky thing, and I guess the role of a coach to understand what makes his players tick and what makes his players excel. So I guess another good little pro. So
yeah, for sure. But I'll move a little bit away from the pro side and kind of, Ace and I both play, in a competitive league, nothing even remotely close to what RLCS or anything like that. But what is kind of a tip or something small that anybody kind of playing Rocket League can use to untilt themselves, so to speak?
Yeah, I get this question asked quite a lot, actually, especially on Rocket League. And I think it's an interesting one, especially hearing it from me and sort of what my mindset is about it, because I play the game quite leisurely, right? I think I'm like in twos, I'm like champ 2 or champ 3 or something. So I'm definitely not like, crazy. And I sort of just play for a bit of fun. So, but I think that the biggest thing is you have to find your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Is it because of a passion? Is it because of an underlying desire to maybe go, pro one day? And then you can sort of have the why at the top, almost like an umbrella, right? You have your why at the top, and this is my why, and you always sort of reflect back to that. And then underneath the umbrella, you have like the raindrops falling off, right? And all the raindrops are different reasons and different things and different, actions that you do, which lead to your why. And that's the way I like to look at it. Say, for example, you have a 15-year-old that's looking to make themselves a name, looking to get themselves into the pro circuit, looking to, get into RLCS, to start playing with bubble teams, to start making, day threes, all that sort of stuff. It's a long process, and I think that you have to acknowledge that as well. It's not going to come overnight. It's not going to be one of those things where you wake up and all of a sudden you're one of the best players in the world. And I think it's the same thing with traditional sport as well, right? It's that same sort of mindset that it is going to be a bit of a grind. But I think the most important thing is being realistic. Being realistic with your expectations of yourself. Being realistic with what you can achieve in the grand scheme of things. Because I think that a lot of people, I've had a chat with a couple of people and they're like, yeah, I stopped study completely. I stopped working. I just want to, commit all my hours to RLCS and the grind and try and be a pro player. And I think that on the very surface level, you should be able to manage a few different things, whether it is maybe a little bit of study alongside playing at its core, but also what it takes and where you are. Like if you're SSL and wanting to push more into different six-man's ranks and sort of climb that ladder there, or a little bit lower of a rank or a little bit higher of a rank, you have to sort of establish where you are on the sort of ladder chain of things. And I guess in the grand scheme, that's one of those raindrops that's falling off, one of those sort of considerations that you need to have in terms of your journey and what you need to do and where you want to go, because I think it is a long one, but I think it could be a very rewarding one at the same time, right? And you can't look at it like a very draining process, like, oh, I just wish I was pro already, or I just wish I was, this rank in six mans, my friends this rank, I'm not this rank, why, what's the difference? And I think you have to just appreciate the journey. That's the biggest tip. Just appreciate the journey, appreciate that it can be a long one, it can be a short one, but if you're not having fun and you're sort of waking up thinking, oh, I've got to sit here and do 2 hours of training packs, split into 30-minute protocols of doing this training pack, taking a break, and you're just looking at that as a draining process, then that's going to hinder your ability to sort of improve. That's going to hinder your ability to sort of take in all the information, take in that skill sets, take in those short-term motor control learning events of what you're actually doing. So I think it's kind of niche and cheesy and cliche, but you just have to enjoy the journey, and that's probably my biggest tip. Just make sure that you are enjoying yourself and you don't have any grand expectations on your back, because if you do, then all of a sudden the process is going to become a lot more unenjoyable, and that's going to just hinder your ability to perform. So you've just got to enjoy it. You've just got to have a bit of fun. So that's probably the big tip I've got.
Yeah, it's a journey, not a destination. That's fantastic.
That's it for sure.
I'll jump into a little bit different of a topic again and ask about Mindclickers. It's your podcast on kind of the mental aspects of esports. I cannot recommend it enough. It's fantastic. How did that kind of come to be?
Yeah, so I started Mindclickers. I was sort of walking around a local oval thinking that I wanted to sort of just learn more about esports. I wanted to learn more about mentality and what better way to do that is to talk with professional players themselves, to have a bit of a one-on-one with them and sort of chat with maybe coaches, chat with even shoutcasters, analysts, org owners, different researchers, sort of stuff. So I created Mindclickers on the back end of just wanting to gain knowledge, but at the same time realizing that I can also share the knowledge as well, right? And I think probably towards the end, obviously I've taken a little bit of a break from Mindclickers just whilst I was going to Worlds, and then obviously looking for orgs, then working with these boys now. But I've got a few episodes on the back burner that will be coming out quite soon, but it took a little bit of a shift towards more Rocket League stuff, just because that's where I felt a little bit more joy in sort of having a chat with different people, having a chat with AppJack, having a chat with Joyo, having a chat with Nick, Chrome, all these sort of individuals in the scene that a lot of people can sort of look to and sort of understand and think, how do they get into Rocket League, and what does Joyo think about on game day? That's a pretty pivotal piece of information I feel like a lot of people think about. So I think that was the sort of core foundation of why I created Mindclickers, to sort of provide myself with a little bit of knowledge about maybe what I can do better, but also at the same time, if I can help one person maybe find a little bit of motivation to do something a bit different, or to get out and go for a walk and exercise, then that's a job well done. So that was the goal behind the podcast, and I don't think the goal will ever change, for sure.
Yeah, that's I cannot recommend it enough. Your interview with Chrome was awesome. I really liked the one with Joyo. Great job.
No, I appreciate that, brother.
And I think that is kind of a topic that can never really be talked about too much with esports, with regular sports, even just with people in general, right? Like the mentality of life is such an important thing to talk about. So hearing it from people that you kind of admire, try to model yourself after, it can only be helpful.
Definitely, 100%. It's always important. But yeah, I remember like reflecting back on Mindclickers towards my first episode where I was just starting off and I wasn't known in the scene. I didn't really have anyone, and it took me like 20 DMs just to get my first. I think it was like 50 DMs just to get my first episode. But then you start, you have one episode under your belt, you start to just gradually expand. People listen to it a little bit more, and all of a sudden, you're getting a different guests in, and I think that's an experience and journey within itself, right? And I think it's taught me a lot about different things and different things, how different things work in terms of, because on Mindclickers, I was the only one that pretty much did everything, from the scouting to messaging to recording to editing, and that was a whole process, learning how to edit a podcast and create a website, and God, that was a painful process, but it's all a journey within itself, right? So
that's why I make Kyle do all that.
I was gonna say, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there.
100%. But yeah, no, we got there in the end, so it was good. And then then I remember I started doing like live episodes, and that was a bit of a how am I going to do this in terms of the recording and audio, and is everything going to be good? But you get there in the end, and I never really forget like the feeling after having an episode, and then you finally do it. You end the episode, and it's like, oh, that felt good. This felt good, and you're sort of just riding that little bit of a post-episode high. That's sort of a really good feeling, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been looking forward to, ever since we talked last week about doing something this week. I've been riding that high since then. So
I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, but I'll ask one last question. So this is the Boost Over Ball podcast. I think people would be very interested in knowing when going for boost over going for the ball is a good idea.
Oh, is that the always the end question is on the Boost Over Ball podcast? I like that. Going for boost. Well, I think going for boost, if you're a boost merchant, like someone like AJ or someone, you go for boost. No, I'll give you a proper, I'll give a proper response. I think going for boost, like I think it's one of the most important things, and can sort of, this sort of splits teams up, right? When you're sort of looking to break rotation and sort of stick in rotation, going for boost is one of those things that allows to keep that pressure, allows to keep that momentum, especially if you're a team like Renegades was, where you're relying on boost, you're relying on being in there, you're relying on picking up their corners, and you're relying on just suffocating them and just nibbling them down and keeping them in their third, which will just allow you to sort of keep that pressure, keep that momentum, to sort of almost brute force a goal in a way. That's how we looked at it. But at the same time, I think you have to have consideration about the challenges that you're putting on the ball, and what that's doing for second man, third man. If you're going to sort of go for a challenge as first man that's going to make second man a bit uncomfortable, then, you sort of have to realize, well, can I be a little bit more patient? Can I get a better touch? Can I leave this for first man? Can I go for a fake? All sorts of considerations that can allow, I guess, the team to feel comfortable about what's going on. But obviously that also includes communication and the grand scheme of things, which I'm probably getting a bit too in-depth there. But I think that, you have to sort of look at what you're doing. But then, you can sort of look at it in more of a ranked. If you're talking about ranked, then I reckon you pick up every pad on the map. If you're playing ranked, you just send it. Triple boost run everyone.
Perfect. That was the answer we're looking for, is you always choose boost over ball.
Yeah, always. Just triple boost run everyone. Don't worry about anyone else. Triple boost run teammates. Don't worry about it.
Just be a boost merchant.
Yeah, no. Boost merchant. That's the quote. That's it. Just be a boost merchant. But no, that's good. I like that. I think that's if that's something you ask like at the end of every episode, I think that's a nice little good thing. That's good.
Thank you. And then last but not least, I'll kind of ask if you want to plug anything, if you want to talk about anything you're working on, any social medias, anything like that. You're more than welcome to plug it, and I'll put all that stuff in the episode description. Yeah,
legendary. I think not too much at the moment. Probably just the main Twitter, where everything will sort of start to gradually come out as we get closer towards the this upcoming split. So if you're interested in sort of keeping track of what the number one APAC team, undisputedly, James Cheese, is doing, make sure to jump on the Twitter and give us a follow at Coach _LBP. And then in the bio, there's also Mindclickers there as well. So you don't need to sort of go chasing too far for it. But that's probably it, sort of. I was doing a bit of YouTube and stuff like that, but, I sort of took a little bit of direction and wanted to focus a bit more on Mindclickers, but that might make a comeback one day, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, probably just the Twitter for now, just so that's where everything is sort of culminating towards esports, and maybe a few things in the works in terms of an esports study I'm doing in the background, which I'll gradually, once we get a publication sort of sorted, I'll be sharing some of the results on Twitter as well. So yeah, just look out for that sort of stuff, and look out for the number one ball chasing merchants in OCE, APAC, James Cheese.
Yeah, all good. Well, now that we've talked to you, I feel like we'll have to lead the cheer on that one. I'll coin it Cheeseheads.
I love it. Phenomenal. I think we'll do that. But no, I also want to just say appreciate you boys reaching out as well. It's a bit of a different experience, being a host of Mindclickers compared to being a guest and going through the thought process of answering questions and all that sort of stuff. So I just want to share my appreciation and respect to you boys for sort of having your own little podcast and sort of starting something from the ground up. I think it's phenomenal what you're doing, and I'm definitely keen to see this grow as well, and whatever I can do to help make this grow, whether it's chuck some tweets out or whatever, definitely more than keen and more than happy to support you boys as well. So much love.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm definitely showing up with. Have you seen? I'm not sure how familiar you are with American football.
Mm-hmm.
But the Green Bay Packers, their thing is like a cheese head.
Oh yeah, I think I might have seen something like that. Yeah.
I'm 100. If you guys are making it to San Diego, I'm 100% rocking up with the cheese heads with James written on it.
Sounds like a plan. Lock it in. I think somebody did that. Someone did that. Someone did that in LA with Queso, maybe.
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah. I think that I had a bit of a flashback. It'd be crazy if I think people are wanting Queso to sign us, and it's like that's the perfect signing. But
I think it would
I don't
be
know if that'll
because
happen.
I think they may let you keep the team name then.
Yeah,
Bit.
literally, they probably would, to be honest. Sort of stick with it. But
maybe
we'll see what happens.
Change it to like James Queso or something.
Maybe that would be cool.
Yeah, but we can't thank you enough for coming and talking to us. This has been an absolute pleasure and a ton of fun.
No worries. Again, much love and much respect, boys, and I appreciate you allowing me to jump on and have a bit of a banter and sort of share some of my ideas about what I think about some stuff. I really value it. So thank you once again.
Thank you. We'll catch you later.
See ya.
Thank you guys again for listening to this interview with Coach LBP. Please make sure to check out Coach LBP on Twitter and check out his podcast, Mindclickers. I think it's a fantastic listen. But again, thank you so much to Coach LBP for jumping on the podcast and answering some questions for us. We can't even express how thankful and happy we are that he was able to do that. It's certainly been a career highlight for me up to this point, and the same goes for Ace. So again, thank you so much to him. Thank you guys all for listening, and remember, just like Coach LBP said, always choose boost over ball, especially if you're a boost merchant. Thank you for listening to the Boost Over Ball podcast.